I'd like to continue our discussion of emergency preparedness by welcoming my next guest, Ms. Sidney Reade. Sidney is an emergency services planner at the Monterey County Office of Emergency Services. Welcome, Sidney, and thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So, Sidney, we just heard Krista talk to us about personal preparedness. We talked about making a kit. We talked about having a plan, being informed. Could you tell me what the difference is between personal preparedness and community preparedness?
Sure. It's really, really important. It's got to start with the person. But the difference between that and a community is the community at large needs to be resilient. It needs to be really robust. And it needs to be able to adapt to whatever conditions are at hand. And it needs to be able to rapidly recover. And it takes a community to be able to do that.
Very well. A community of people all doing the various things that we talked about earlier and just being ready for something and being ready to prepare together. Right. That's what you're saying. So how does one go about bringing a community together for disaster preparedness?
Well, the way we go about doing that is we take the approach that no one sector can do it by itself. So we want to form relationships and partnerships between the private sector and the public sector. Because when people think about emergency response, they think about the public sector, fire departments, law enforcement, the Office of Emergency Services, the health department. They think about the public sector. But we say not one sector can do it alone. So we want to form those partnerships. And the way we go about doing that is we go about identifying the people, the agencies, the departments, the organizations that on a day-to-day basis help people live independently. Now that can be something like the mom and pop grocery store or the great big food chain or organization that people go to every day to buy the things that they put in their go bags or put on their shelves to live independently, whether it's food or diapers or whatever, gasoline in their gas tanks, whether it's something like the health department and all of your departments, public health, the private healthcare sector, the hospitals, the clinics that people rely on for their health on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the Department of Social Services with child services, family services, adult services, animal services. It really takes a lot of organizations and agencies for us to be independent on a daily basis. All of those organizations, agencies, departments, they have a role in helping us be independent in a disaster. So we form partnerships with them. We have alliances already in place with organizations and agencies that are faith-based, that are nonprofit, that are public, that are private, like the Center for Independent Living, like the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center, like the Blind and Visually Impaired Center, like the SPCA, like the Red Cross, like the Alliance on Aging, like the food banks, the Housing Authority, and all of those kinds of agencies, our transportation providers, our schools, our educational institutions, our banking facilities. All of those people on an independent basis come together, form the partnerships to say, what can we do to make our community more robust and more reliant and resistant through a disaster.
Wow, so that's what you guys are up to over there at Emergency Services.
They just don't know it until we approach them and say, you know what you do on a daily basis? We need to have you do it during a disaster. And we need to have you do it in a preparedness role, not just a response role.
So it sounds like pretty much everywhere that, I don't know, I can say everywhere that I go on a daily basis for the most part is involved, has a role in some way to help out our community in case of emergency. And those roles and responsibilities have been defined already?
No, they haven't been defined in a time of disaster, and so that we feel is our job. And so we have certain strategies. But for example, if you are a person who relies on child support or Women and Infants and Children's program to be independent on a daily basis, what would you do if there was a disaster and you could not get access to those services? So we say, well, we can help you. We can help you think out of the box about how you would continue to be able to provide those. And you might need some help, and you might need to be on a committee and work with a team. And we can partner you with other organizations and agencies that can help you be in the right place at the right time. And so we have those strategies. Now those strategies are, what are the services that people might need if they cannot stay in their home, or even if they can stay in their home. And you've heard these terms before, and so has the public. Care and shelter, mass care and shelter, mass transportation and evacuation, debris removal. In an earthquake, for example, or a major flood or tsunami, to get to point A to point B, to get your groceries or whatever, there may need to be major mass debris removal. So we need to have plans, and it takes partnerships and groups of organizations to work together to be able to accomplish those. So we have those strategies: donations management, volunteer management.
And these are some of the plans that we have.
Yeah, so when Krista earlier from the health department was talking about those individual plans, we bring working groups together with the appropriate agencies, organizations, groups, define their roles and responsibilities, and we develop the community-wide and even the regional plans with those topics.
I see. And so I do also see here that you've brought a few examples of such plans together to show here. And in my hand, I'm holding the Monterey County, what is it, Catastrophic Earthquake Mass Transportation and Evacuation Plan. And this is an example of parts and entities of the community, if I'm saying this correctly, coming together, doing some forethought, lots of planning, and all of those agencies and groups that have fit within the structure of transportation and evacuation have been included in this plan?
Yeah. So before I say exactly who might have been involved in that one,
Sure.
I want to say that the community planning is for general population. And when I'm saying general population, we're including people like you and me, and absolutely everybody with an access and functional need. That could be me, all of a sudden I lost my car keys and now I need transportation, or somebody who just doesn't drive, or somebody for some reason all of a sudden now needs transportation. It could be somebody who has a communication issue, whether they don't speak the language, or they lost their hearing aid, or their battery's gone dead, or they just have a hard time communicating in general because they're 2 years old. So when we talk about access and functional needs population, we're talking about people who might need supervision, who might need communications assistance, transportation, or any other kind of need because of some sort of a shortcoming that they just can't do it alone. We also include our pet population. So I'm really glad that Krista Haney brought up the fact that when you plan for your pet. Every single one of our community plans includes our pets. So now when we talk about, for example, mass transportation and evacuation, our planning partners for that one included all of our transportation partners, including MST, for example, but school, all of our school resources, our labor resources that we have in our agricultural community. We tapped into every kind of organization that has transportation resources available that are willing to mass transport. We identified where the pickup points would be. We use law enforcement, Department of Public Works, all of our engineering like Caltrans, who know our roadways, the American Red Cross, who would deal with where would the appropriate destination be, as in shelters. The reason that we use engineering and Department of Public Works and Caltrans is because they have to figure out where the damage is to the transportation routes. And then California Highway Patrol would help to determine what would be an appropriate transportation route. Red Cross would say here would be an appropriate destination, as in a shelter, to get the people to. The Fire and Law agencies say here is the population at risk who's in a hazard area that has to be moved. So it takes collaboration with all of those groups to say, who's got to get moved, where can we move them to, and where are the safe routes? And then we determine the debris removal plan to remove the debris, to get the transportation route up and running so that we can move the people. SPCA is there working with the pickup points to say, we'll get there, we'll bring the crates so the pets, the fluffies, the scalies, the barkies, the meowies can all be crated to get on the bus and to be moved to the evacuation points so that they can be sheltered with their families. Then we have the large animal evacuation groups as well, so that large animals can be evacuated and rescued and evacuated as well. And we use United Way 211 to get the word out to the public so that they can call to make arrangements for their evacuation. So those are a few of just Oh, and I want to throw in the schools, because a lot of times the schools, number one, are where the children are and the parents are calling to say, where are my kids and are they safe? And also the schools a lot of times turn out to be an appropriate shelter location. Not always, but a lot of times. So that's a large working group. That's a large planning group. But using that group, we're getting the input, you know, to come up with a reasonable plan, assign the roles and responsibilities so everybody knows what it is they're doing. Event for the first 72 hours, who's doing what, who's working with who, who's got the responsibility, and who's secondary to help them.
And I see, you know, quite obviously after you've mentioned, you know, the part about the plans, who's involved, how the plans pretty much get made and put into this binder, it's so important for community members to not necessarily know every detail of the plan or, you know, read through it word for word, but know things like schools oftentimes make very good shelters, and, you know, calling United Way 211 to find out, you know, what can I do with my pet, where's the nearest shelter, things like that. That's part of the Be Informed that I guess we mentioned earlier, but it's great things they're great things to know, because you know, what are you going to do when your kid is at school, and who are you going to call, and how are you going to get through to them, and so I love you mentioning all these things. And what other types of excuse me, strategies or groups that fit into certain strategies? I mean, I understand that there's overall strategies for community planning for preparedness, but I guess maybe more of like, here I see the mass care and sheltering plan. What types of groups are involved in a plan like that? You know,
in mass care and sheltering, a lot of times people don't think about the fact that they may have to leave their home. They want to stay. They're going to hunker down and they're going to stay. But it may get to the point where they realize they don't have a home. Like in a wildland fire, we've been reading about the fires and seeing on television the devastation, say in Texas, where they come back and there is no home. So mass care and shelter, at least for maybe 72 hours to a week, or until they know where they can go next for interim housing, is a reality for them. So bringing together a working group to come up with an adequate catastrophic mass care and shelter plan is very, very important to make sure that we have, number one, adequate shelter space identified. And in a plan like this, it does not say where the shelters are. You never know where they will be or where they can be until the disaster happens, and then that's a decision that the Red Cross or Department of Social Services would make at the time. But we identify where they are and what all it would take to care and shelter a large population. So again, we would have all of those working groups that deal with making people independent on a daily basis, people who help people be independent. So all of our social care agencies, our Centers for Independent Living, blind and visually impaired, deaf and hard of hearing, you know, animal services, again, because we take care of our pets as PCA. It's all of the food banks, and the Red Cross takes the lead and has relationships with a whole lot of volunteer groups who help them care and shelter people. It's a logistical relationship, and we have faith-based people, we have mental health services like you wouldn't believe, because it's taking care of people from head to toe, inside and out. It takes a lot of groups of people. Salvation Army, I can go on. And again, 211, United Way, they play a huge role. You know, I really would like to point out, since we're speaking to the public, people want to help in times of a disaster. So our volunteer management plan and our donations management plan, people want to donate. We have disaster victims. And I don't like the word victim, but it's a word that gets used. People will have needs. So they are people in need during a disaster. And you can call them a victim if you want, but they have needs, all right? So our job at the Office of Emergency Services is determine what their needs are, and that usually comes from the field, the environment, the care and shelter environment, and the local assistance centers that we set up. People have needs, and they register for what they need. They might need money, so they can buy the things they need, or they might need clothing, or they might need food, or they might need insurance, or they might need housing. But until you know what they need, you know, don't start donating unless you want to donate the cash or the money or the gift cards, because we'll end up with a lot of debris. Or things that we cannot get rid of, and we'll have a real issue. So we have a donations management plan that allows us to quickly tell you what the needs are and how to donate, so that we can manage the donations. We can manage them and get them quickly to the people who are suffering in the disaster. Match the needs with the people who need them very efficiently. And it's a really great plan. And again, it took a group of people to come together to work on how to do that. And the excess goes to the groups that can use it, like the food banks and the Salvation Army, and on those other groups of people who regularly use donations. You know, well, food drives, coat drives, shoe drives, you know. Absolutely.
It sounds like there's definitely, if there's a will or if there's a need, there's a way. And it has definitely been planned for by a collaborative group of agencies or individuals to iron out the logistics, make these plans available, and make sure that things that people are giving, if it's time, if it's goods, are being used to the fullest potential. And Sidney, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be with us today, and I want to let everyone know that we're very lucky to have Sidney here with us to help us manage our plans and pretty much help Monterey County be as prepared as possible. So if you'd like any more information on anything you just heard, excuse me, about community preparedness, individual preparedness, and more, please visit the Monterey County Office of Emergency Services on the web at www.co.monterey.ca.us/OES for Office of Emergency Services. So real quick again, that's www.co.monterey.ca.us/OES. So right now we're going to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the Your Health television program.